Okay, hello everyone and welcome. This is Dr. Mastro Marino broadcasting to you from my home, or as I like to call it, Mastroland. So today, what we're going to look at is how to pick fictional support material to go along with your research paper. And so as not to kind of make it too easy for some people, I'm using a book we've already done instead of using Brave New World. And what I'm going to talk you through are some of the thought processes that you should be using, as well as some of the pitfalls that you're going to run into that in the past students have been very frustrated by, and then they just kind of want to give up, or they come to me going, what do I do now? And because we are not as able to conference in person as often, I want to try to hopefully get you through it this way. So let's assume that we had actually been writing this paper about Heart of Darkness. Great. You want to try to find two fictional sources that are related to what you're writing about. Now, what I'm going to tell you, the biggest mistake you're going to make is this. You're going to go to Google and you're going to type in poems about Heart of Darkness. I'm going to show you why that's a mistake. Because what you're going to end up with is something like this, which at first you find this and you go, ooh, this is a recent poem. This is published in the New Yorker. It must be good. Whether or not it's good is immaterial. Whether or not it's useful is what we care about. So we start reading this poem, and you look at it and go, years ago I went to NoHo Star with some poets and Cecil Taylor. NoHo Star is closed now, and Cecil died yesterday. I walked back to Union Square and watched black men playing chess, rubbing their jaws while the afternoon light poured down the gentle rooks on their fingers. Hanging above a queen or a pawn, Cecil Taylor sat across the table. And then you say, what does this have to do with Heart of Darkness? If you skip a little ahead in the poem, especially if you get right about here-ish, the way a special music clung to Cecil Taylor followed the radical swing and swag of his voice. Do you want to have the Heart of Darkness together, he said. That looks sweet enough. I remembered later when we stood on the sidewalk, sugar and poetry in us, heat coming up. There's a connection here. I'm almost assuming that the Heart of Darkness is probably like a really dark chocolate cake that they might have been having in this place. Is that going to help you with your paper? Unlikely. And here is also why. Because you didn't pick anything specific to talk about. If you just try to Google stuff about Heart of Darkness, you could end up spending the rest of your life chasing that. That's the mistake. I'm going to tell you how you fix that. You fix that by you have to be very specific and you have to be willing to dig. This is like any research paper. Digging is the most frustrating part of it. Every time I ever wrote a paper, no matter whether I was in high school all the way through to my dissertation, I always ran into the problem of finding the right materials. That was where I spent the vast majority of my time. The writing was never a problem for me. It was finding the right materials. That being said, I instead started doing a search where I said, well, what do I want to talk about? And I said, well, maybe I want to talk about in Heart of Darkness, British imperialism. That is still a lot, and I found a lot of poems, until I finally found one I liked. And it's this one, it's called Slough by John Bechtelman. And, if you start to look at it, especially when you get to like this stanza right here, okay, where you see something like come bombs and blow to smithereens those air-conditioned bright canteens, tinned fruit, tinned meat, tinned milk, tinned beans, tinned mines, tinned breath. There's something in here about this section in particular that, to me, talks about the idea of some form of imperialism or like industrial progress. And the rest of the poem goes on. And the poem is actually quite extensive. That's why I'm not giving it all to you right here. But there's a lot in here you could have used. That's the kind of work you have to be willing to do. What specifically do you want to write about? Now, if you don't want to use poetry and you want to use novels or short stories, great. You have a limited amount of time, so I would limit that to stuff you've already done. Let's say, for instance, you were writing about Heart of Darkness and you wanted to talk about the need for rules and law and order, or man's chaotic nature. Maybe you want to talk about the Lord of the Flies in that case. If you want to talk about institutional racism, maybe you want to talk about To Kill a Mockingbird. If you want to talk about the oppression of poor workers, maybe you want to talk about Of Mice and Men. So those are some ways I would go about looking for this. You have to figure out for yourself, what are you looking for? If you're having trouble in your searches, it's because you're not asking the right question. Your question is probably way too vague. Be very leery of the kind of poems you find. My impression is this: you find something that's written in the last 2 or 3 years, I question how valid it is. Poetry, like a lot of art, is something that takes time for everyone to recognize it and say, yeah, this is it, this is good. You know, you have a poem that's much older and people are still talking about it, that probably has some weight and some value to it. So start looking for those things now. And if you have questions about if you found something, if you think it's going to work, write to me, share with me your thesis, share with me what you think this poem is going to do for you. All right, any questions, comments, concerns, please feel free to just let me know. Hope everybody has a great day. Stay safe.